Hello, Teacher M over here, and I'm here again to give you help on your homework. And we are now on DMR number 2, Daily Math Review number 2. And this is page 2 of your exit ticket and DMR notes. So there are like 9 items here. Let's start on item number 1. On item number 1, it says where is 60% located on the following number line. Okay, so you can see that the number line is divided into parts. So how do you count the number of parts here? You don't start on 0. You count like this is the first part. That's why I wrote down that is my first part there. And then this is the second part, the third, the fourth, and then the fifth part. Therefore, if I have to write it as a fraction, there are a total of 5 parts at the bottom. So what I'm going to suggest is for you to write a fraction for each part. So the first fraction will be the first part having 1 part out of 5 parts. What are you going to do with this is top in, bottom out, then change it to a decimal and then percent. Then you figure out whether that will equal to 0.6, which is your 60%. So let's show our work here on the side of the paper. So top in, bottom out, the top number, the numerator goes in, and the bottom number goes out. Your denominator is your divisor. You know that 5 cannot go into 1, so that's going to be a 0. Then that's going to be decimal before you add a 0 and make that 1 bigger than the 5 outside. 10 divided by 5 is 2 on the tenths place. And then 2 times 5 is 10. Subtract, that's going to be 0. Now, how do we change that 2/10 that we got from our division into a percent? Remember, from a decimal to a percent, you have to move that decimal point twice to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it. This is the 1 time to the right, and then we need it another time. So your point will be here. And you know that this is an empty spot, so you need a number here, which is going to be a 0. So if you're going to have to rewrite your number as a percent, that's going to be 2, a 0 here. Now the decimal point is here, and your percent symbol. So meaning your 1/5 is equivalent to 20%. Now you have an idea that the first part of your number line is not going to be your answer, which is 20%, because you're looking for a 60%. So do it again with the second part. The second part is 2 out of 5. What are you going to do with this is top in, bottom out, change it again to a decimal, okay, and find out whether it's going to equal to that 60% we need. So you have now an idea what to do, and you write as a fraction each part of them out of 5. Then top in, bottom out, whichever equals to 6/10 or 60%, then that's going to be your answer. Okay? Now let's move on to item number 2. So on number 2, Ron has a goal of saving $51.75. He will save the same amount each week for 9 weeks. How much will Ron need to save each week in order to meet his goal? Okay, so you have to list down everything that you know and understand from the problem. You know that his goal is to save a total of $51.75. So we know that. Also, he will save the same amount of money for each week of 9 weeks. But the thing that we don't know is how much will it be that he will be saving for each week. So this is the first week. How much will be the savings here? The second week, how much will be the savings? The third week, how much will be the savings? All the way to the 9 weeks, how much will be the saving for each, right? So we have to figure out. You know that the word each means divide. So let's go ahead and divide. The given problem has $51.75 for his goal to save, and you have to divide it by the 9 weeks. But since that is the problem you have to solve, I'm going to go ahead and give you another example that is going to be similar. So let's say The goal here on my example is to save $36.75. And I will have to save for 7 weeks. How much will I be saving for each week? So I have to divide $36.75 by the number of weeks I have to save. Okay? Pay attention to the decimal point. Place it straight up there. Okay? Let's underline the first two digits. What is 36 divided by 7? That's going to be 5 on the ones place value. Multiply 7 times 5. That's going to be 35. Subtract below here. So 6 minus 5 is 1. Now make that 1 bigger than the 7 by bringing down the next digit. 17 divided by 7 is 2 on the tens place. 2 times 7 is 14. Subtract, that is 3. Bring down the 5, the next digit. 35 divided by 7. Now let me just show you skip counting of 7 below down here. How many 7 can we skip count with in order to get a 35? So 7 plus 7 is 14, plus 7 is 21, plus 7 is 28, then plus another 7, that's going to be 35. So 35 divided by 7 is exactly 5 on the hundreds place, then 5 times 7 is 35, then subtract down here, that's going to be 0. So how much in my example will I need to save each week, right? That's going to be $5.25. Now if I multiply $5.25 times the number of weeks I have to save them, then I'm just going to go back to this original number. And that's how you're going to check your work, by working backwards. Okay? So you go ahead, try this, $51.75 divided by the 9 weeks that Ron needs to save on the problem. Okay? Item number 3, John lives 9.12 kilometers from his work. Write the fraction that represents the distance from John's house to his work. So they want a what? A fraction. What is given is a decimal. So I'm going to give you an example. Instead of me working on 9.12, I'm going to work with 9.15. Now pay attention to the place value of the last digit. You know that the 1 is on the tenths and the 5 is on the hundreds. And you have a whole place value here, which is the 9. So what you're going to do is write down the 9 big enough, and then there's going to be a fraction beside it. The 1500s will be that 15 on the top, and then the bottom number will be the place value of the last digit, which is your hundreds. Now let's go ahead and simplify the 15 over 100. You know, anything that ends with 5 and 0 can always be divided by 5. So 15 divided by 5 is 3. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So this is a simpler form of 15 over 100. Now, what am I missing on my answer is that whole number, so don't forget that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and assess my answer. The top number is 3, and it's an odd number, while the bottom number is an even number. That means there's no other factor that I can use to divide them with to further simplify them, but by 1. And if I divide them by 1, it's still going to be the same thing. That means this is going to be my final answer, which is already in the simplest form. Now go ahead and try the one given on the problem on item number 3, which is 9.12. Try what I did on 9.15, do it with 9.12, okay? Number 4, it says Carl used 3/8 of a tank of gasoline going to Houston. Which decimal and percent represent this amount? So the given fraction is 3/8. You want to change it first to a decimal by doing top in, bottom out, like what it says on the hint, and then move the decimal point twice to the right to change it to a percent. So instead of me working on that 3/8, I'm going to change my example to 5/8. So top in, bottom out, the 5 goes in, and the bottom number goes out. You know 5 divided by 8 is 0, and then add a decimal point before you add a 0 and make that 5 bigger. So we don't forget that decimal point on the top. Now inside, behind that decimal point, add a 0. 50 divided by 8. If you skip count by 8, repeatedly add 8 to itself, you're going to get 8, 16, 24, plus another 8 is 32, plus 8 is 40, plus 8 is 48. And you don't want to go over 50, so we're going to stop at 48. So 50 divided by 8 is 6 times, okay? So that's going to be on the tens. Then multiply your answer with your divisor. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract down below here. So 0 minus 8 cannot be. You borrow 1 from 5. 5 became 4, and then that 0 on top of 8 becomes 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. 4 minus 4 is 0. Now make that 2 bigger by adding another 0, then bring it down. Now the 2 becomes 20. 20 divided by 8 is 2. So that's going to be 2 on the hundreds place. Then 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract. It's going to be 4. Then you want that 4 to become bigger than 8. So you add a 0 inside the division box. Bring it down. 40 divided by 8. And you know what is 40 divided by 8? That's going to be the 5, right? Because 5 times 8 is 40. So your answer here on the thousands place is 5. And 5 times 8 is 40 down below here. And 40 minus 40 is 0. So your 5/8 is equivalent to this decimal. Now what we have to do next is change this to a percent by moving the decimal point twice to the right. So you will have a 62.5%. So your 5/8 is equivalent to 625 thousandths, and which is equivalent also to 62.5%. Now that you have an example for item number 4, you may do the same thing for the 3/8, top in bottom out, and then change it to a percent. On number 5, Megan paints her locker yellow, white, and green. She paints 1/4 of her locker yellow, 15% were white, and 60 hundredths green. Looking at the table, you have some numbers given for yellow is a fraction, so you have to change it to a decimal. So you know what to do with that 1/4, top in, bottom out, okay? Once you have the decimal, move the decimal point twice to the right to change it to 8%. Now look at the white. The white, the number given is 15%. It's not a fraction, it's not a decimal. So what are you going to do is change it to a fraction, okay? You know the percent means out of 100, the 15 goes on top, and simplify it. Once you have the simplest form, write it here on the fraction column. And then you may go ahead and write it also as a decimal. You know what 15 hundredths mean. Use the place value wisely. Now let's look at green. On green, the one that is given is a decimal. So you write it. You want to move that decimal point twice to the right so you can change it to a percent. You may also write this down as a fraction, okay, either out of tens or out of 100, and then simplify it. I'll go ahead and work on this 60 hundredths as an example, okay, so you'll be able to know what to do with yellow and white. So if I'm given 60 hundredths, I can write it as 6/10 or 60 out of 100. Then how do you simplify? Think of a number that can go into 60 and 100. They both end with 0. So that means I can divide them by a factor that also ends with 0. By 20, which is the greatest common factor of 60 and 100. So if I divide 60 by 20, that's 3 times, because if I skip count by 20, that's 20, 40, and then 60, right? So that's 3. 100 divided by 20 is going to be 5. So that means my fraction here will be 3 out of 5. Please practice on simplifying fraction to the simplest form. Now on item number 6, this is the same thing that we had as an example on our daily math review, page 1, at the front of our exit ticket. So the table shows the number of candies sold for each flavor. You have lemon, 60 pieces sold, toffee, 80 pieces sold, orange, 20 pieces sold, and strawberry, 140 pieces sold. The question is, which flavor of candy represents 20%? The easier strategy here is to change that given percent into a decimal. You know that 20% used to be 0.2 or 0.20, okay? So after doing that, what you do is find the total of all the candy sold. If you're going to have a hard time adding all these numbers all at once, then add 2 at a time. So 60 plus 80 is 140. So I'm done with the first 2. Then add the second one, which is 20. That's going to be 160. So you're done with the 20. Then add the 140, which is the last amount. 0. 6 plus 4 is 10. Carry 1. That's 3. So now that we have the total pieces of candies, what we do with this and the decimal form of our percent is multiply it. This way you're going to be able to get a number that will be equal to one of these numbers here, because that's going to be the 20% of the 300. So let's go ahead and multiply 300 times 0.20 or 0.2. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 3 is 6. Now multiply by the 0. That's 0 times 0 is 0 on the second column. Then 0 by the middle 0. On the top is 0. Then 0 times 3 is 0. Okay? Then you add down here. Make sure you're adding in straight columns. So 0, just bring this down. 0 plus 0 is 0. 6 plus 0 is 6. And the 0 is just a 0 here. Now look at your numbers that you were trying to multiply. You have a decimal point, and how many digits did we multiply with behind the decimal point? That's 1 digit. So that means on your final answer, you have to also place 1 number behind the decimal point. Okay? So now look at our product after multiplying 300, the total pieces of candy sold, by 0.2. We got 60. Looking at the table, which one has 60? The lemon. Okay? That means that is the answer here. Which flavor? It's going to be the lemon that represents 20% sold. On item number 7, it says Mr. S bought 4 packages of fertilizers. The weights of the packages were 5 3/5 pounds, 5 2/3 pounds, 5 wholes and 5/8 pounds, and 11 halves pounds. Okay? So, the question is, which list shows the weight from lightest to heaviest? And we mentioned in our class that lightest to heaviest is the same thing as least to greatest. Write it down. So we have to put them in order from the smallest number going to the greatest number. But how are we supposed to compare numbers like mixed numbers, 5 3/5, 5 2/3, 5 5/8, and that 11 halves? The strategy that I always teach my students is change all these numbers, these mixed numbers, to a decimal, because decimal forms are like your money. So we can think of them like our money and we can easily compare them. So let's take the 5 3/5. You have a whole number, so you know the whole number comes before a decimal point, okay? Then the fraction form, top in, bottom out. So you know 5 cannot go into 3, that's 0. Make that bigger. Don't forget the decimal point on the top, add a 0. It's a 6 on the 10th. 6 times 5 is 30. Then subtract that 0. So when I go back to my decimal form of 5 3/5, on the 10th place should be that number I got from my division, which is the 6. So like money, that's like $5.60. Now let's take the second mixed number, which is 5 wholes and 2/3. And you know the whole number 5 should come before the decimal point. Then the fractional part, 2/3, we will top in, bottom out. The 2 goes in, the bottom number goes out. 3 cannot go into 2, that's going to be 0 on top of 2. Decimal, decimal, then add a 0 inside the division box. 20 divided by 3 is 6 on the 10th place. 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract. 10 minus 8 is 2. Now add a 0 to make that 2 bigger. Bring it down. 20 divided by 3 is 6 again, right? On the hundreds place. 6 times 3 is 18. Subtract, that's 2. And it seems like if I add another 0, it's going to be 20 again. So it just keeps on repeating by the same number on top. When the number is keep on going by the same number, you just go ahead and stop doing your division and put a bar notation, a line on the top of the number that repeats. So our 5 and 2/3 is like $5.66. Now let's try 5 and 5/8. Which one is the whole number? That big number on the side? So as a decimal, it comes before the decimal point, right? So it's like $5, but we have the 5/8. You don't just write down the 5/8 here. That is a common mistake that students are doing. Remember, with the fraction 5/8 or any fraction, to change it to a decimal, we have the top in, bottom out. You know 8 cannot go into a 5. Inside the division box is just a 5. So that's going to be 0 on top of 5. Make the 5 bigger. Don't forget the decimal points also on top, and then add a 0. 50 divided by 8. Go ahead, skip count by 8 to find out how many times can we skip count by 8 to get close to a 50. But don't go over 50. When I skip counted by 8, I was able to skip count 6 times. So 50 divided by 8 is 6. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract. 50 minus 48 is 2. Make the 2 bigger by adding a 0 inside the division box and then bring it down. 20 divided by 8 is 2 on the hundreds place. Then multiply 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract. 20 minus 16 is 4. Make that 4 bigger. Add another 0. Bring it down. That's going to be 40. 40 divided by 8. Look at our skip counting here. 40 divided by 8 is 5 times. So that is 5 on the thousands place. Multiply 5 times 8 just to end your division. 40 minus 40 down here is 0. So no remainder is left. Therefore, behind this $5 that we have is that 625 thousandths. Now let's do the last one, which is the 11 halves. 11 halves is improper fraction, but you have to change it to a decimal. You still do top in, bottom out. So the 11 goes in, the 2 goes out. Now you see here, 11 is bigger than the 2. So that means it's not going to be a 0 on top. 2 can go into 11. Go ahead, skip count by 2. If I skip count by 2 6 times, it's going to go over than 11. And I don't want that. So I'm not going to include this. I'm just going to stop over here. So I skip counted 5 times. So 2 can go into 11 5 times. So 11 divided by 2 is 5 on the top of the 11. 5 times 2 is 10. Subtract, that's 1. Now add that 0, bring it down. Now the 1 becomes 10. 10 divided by 2, you know that's 5. 5 times 2 is 10. Then subtract down with below. 10 minus 10 is 0. And in terms of money, that $5 and the 5 tenths, that's like $5.50. So let's go back here and write it down. Now that all our numbers are in decimal form, we're going to have to compare them and find out which one is the least amount. And we're going to arrange them from starting from the least going to the heaviest. Okay? In order to compare our numbers, we have to line them up. Now you line them up, making sure that all the decimal points are in one straight line. And everything will be in the correct place. Like all the ones will be in one column, all the tenths will be in the same column, all the hundreds, the same column, and the thousands. Now on the places without a digit, you go ahead put a 0 as a placeholder. Now we're gonna compare from the ones going to the right, okay? The ones are all the same. They're all 5 wholes. So we're gonna move on to the next place value, which is behind your decimal point, the tenths. Look at that. This is 6 tenths, this is 6 tenths, this is 6 tenths, this is 5 tenths. So which one do you think is the least amount on the tenths place value? You know that the 5 tenths is smaller than the 6 tenths. So therefore, it's like our money, the $5.50 is the least amount. And that $5.50 or 5.5 was originally your 11 halves. So you write down the original number because that's what you're going to see on your answer choices. So that is the first one, okay, meaning that is the least on our list. That should be the first one listed. Now let's look at the rest of them. We know that all the tens place value, the rest of them are 6 on the tens place value. So what we're going to do is move on to the right. Next is the hundreds place value. We are going from least to greatest. So which one do you think is next after $5.50? Okay, the one that has 0 here is the next one. Because 2 is bigger than the 0 on the hundreds place, this 6 is bigger than the 0 on the hundreds place. And we know originally that $5.60 is the 5 3/5. So that is our second one. Now as you work, you want to look at your answer choices. We know that our list should begin with 11 halves. Look at letter A. It didn't begin with 11 halves, so you know that you have to cancel that out. Between choice B and C, they both started with 11 halves, and we know the second one should be 5 3/5. They both have 5 3/5, so we must keep on comparing our numbers. So look at the hundreds place again. The other one has 6 hundreds, and the other one it has 2 on the hundreds place. So which one do you think is gonna be next on our list? People, this 5.625, that is just like our money, $5.62. We don't actually care about the thousands place, but for the sake of comparing, I place it there. But compare the 2 with the 6, 62 cents is smaller than 66 cents. Therefore, on our list, the third one listed should be the 5 5/8, which is equivalent to $5.62. And the last one on the list should be the biggest number because we're looking for lightest to heaviest. The heaviest has always the biggest number, and that is going to be our $5.66, which was originally 5 wholes and 2/3. Therefore, if you have to list down your decimal numbers or the fraction numbers, it should be $5.50 first because that's the least. Then higher than $5.50 is your $5.60. Then higher than that is $5.62. And the highest is the $5.66. And you know that is the same thing as this arrangement down here. From least to greatest. So which one is our answer? You go ahead and decide. Now on item number 8, it says, what fraction, decimal, and percent of votes are for action? So there's a hint. You have to find the total of the votes. Then write your number as a fraction. Then simplify. If you need to change it to a decimal, then you stop in bottom out. So as a fraction, you have to look at their question first again. They want the number for action as a fraction, decimal, and percent. So you look at the action, it's 6. Therefore, that's your number on the top of a fraction. So that's going to be 6. And at the bottom will always be your total number. Upon adding all of the votes, you're going to have a total of 20. So you have to have 20 at the bottom. This is your fraction, but you have to simplify it first. Remember that we can divide anything that ends with 2, 4, 6, 8, and 0 by 2. So 6 divided by 2, it's going to be 3 on our new fraction. And then at the bottom, 20 divided by 2 is 10. So your new fraction is 3/10. And you can tell that 3 is already a small number. And 3 is an odd number, while the bottom number 10 is an even number. So therefore, there is no common factor now that can go into 3 and 10, but by 1. And if we divide them by 1, it's still going to be 3/10. So as a fraction, our final answer is 3/10. Now we want to change it to a decimal. What do we do to change a fraction to a decimal? Top in, bottom out. The top number goes inside, then divide by 10, which is your bottom number outside. So you know that 3 divided by 10 can't be, because 10 is bigger than your dividend 3 inside. So that's a 0. Then make 3 bigger. Don't forget the decimal point before you add a 0. Also, the decimal point on top. Add 1 0. You know 30 divided by 10 is 3 on the tens place. Then 3 times 10 is 30. Subtract down below. You don't have any remainder. Look at our answer. It's 3/10, isn't it? That is our fraction, 3/10. It is obvious that the 3 will be on the tens place because of our place value at the bottom of our fraction. So our final answer as a decimal is 3/10 or 0.3. Now how do we change that 3/10 into a percent? We have to move the decimal point twice to the right. Add a 0 on the place that doesn't have a digit. Therefore, it's 30%. Okay, now item number 9. It says here, Sheila has a balance of $750 in her checking account on August 28th. What would be Sheila's new balance after all the following transaction on September 25? Let's look at the transactions. It says rental fee, meaning you're going to have to pay your rent on your apartment, so that's going to be subtraction. Then look at the other one, salary, meaning you're going to receive money, 1,200, so you're going to have to add that. Look at paid college. So she's going to college, she has to buy books, so that means you're going to spend the money, subtract it. Then grocery, you have to spend money, so that's subtraction. Now you have to write down how much she has right now, and that is a balance of $750 on her checking account. First things first, what happened on August 29 is that she has to pay her rental fee for her apartment. So when you say you have to subtract that, that is a debit, okay? So after paying the apartment for rental fee, what is left of her $750 is $200. What happened next is that on August 31, she received her salary of $1,200. So that's going to be a credit because you're receiving it. So therefore, you're going to add it to whatever you have right now. The decimal points of these whole numbers are behind them, so line them up. Add carefully. So now she has 1,400. Then place the new balance under the column that says balance. Look what happened next. On September 25th, she has to buy the books or pay for the books. So that means you're going to be spending money. So that is a debit, subtracting. 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. 4 minus 5 cannot be. So you borrow 1 from 1. The 4 becomes 14. 14 minus 5 is 9. And then, therefore, that is what is left of her 1,400 after paying for the books. Now, what happened next on September 25th? She has to do some grocery. So that is buying food. So you have to subtract. That's a debit. 0 minus 0 is 0. 10 minus 5 is 5. You borrowed 1 from 9, so the 9 became 8. 8 minus 1 is 7. So how much is left of her money? So it's 750 that is left of her money. So you see, this is like a real life situation. Someday you're going to be doing this on your own savings account or checking account. And plus, I forgot to mention, this financial literacy will be 1 or 2 of the questions on your STAR test. So really, you really have to work on this, learn it, okay? It's just a matter of subtracting and adding numbers and writing down each time what you have until you get to the final answer. Okay, there you have it. So I hope this homework help will be useful to you. Please do watch this video. You can rewind, rewatch, you can pause it, take down notes. Okay, so I'm gonna see you in class. Good luck on your homework. Bye.